quiet hum of the air conditioner was the only sound that broke the stillness of the luxury suite overlooking the ancient Plaka district of Athens. Below, the city was a tapestry of shimmering lights and deep-set history, a living postcard of civilization. But in this room, time itself seemed to be holding its breath. He was a general, a man accustomed to the rigid certainties of command and the crisp starch of a military uniform, a garment which now hung like a forgotten skin in the wardrobe. For this evening, it had been replaced by a tailored silk shirt that felt alien and ostentatious against his skin, a costume for a role he was only just learning. Adnan al-Hamid, a celebrated lion of the Syrian military, a strategist whose name was spoken with respect in the halls of the general staff, felt like an uncertain young man again, utterly captivated by the woman sitting across from him. She called herself Helena Varthakouris, an art dealer, she had said, a citizen of the world with a mind as sharp as her sculpted features and a profound, almost tragic melancholy in her eyes that he found intoxicating. For 6 weeks, she had been his clandestine escape, his confidant, the living embodiment of a sophisticated, liberated life he craved but could never possess. In a cramped, anonymous surveillance van, parked on a quiet side street 2 blocks away, a man named Yaron watched the scene unfold on a bank of high-resolution monitors. He was the conductor of this silent, intricate orchestra, and Helena was his first violin, his Stradivarius. Every smile she offered, every word she murmured, every subtle, lingering gesture had been scripted, rehearsed, and perfected over countless hours. Yaron listened to the general's low laugh, a sound of genuine pleasure captured with perfect fidelity by a microphone hidden inside a Murano glass bedside lamp, and felt the familiar, cold knot of anticipation tighten in his gut. Operation Aegean Gambit, a plan more than a year in the making, was entering its final, irreversible phase. Helena rose, her movement a study in practiced grace, and moved toward the small, well-stocked bar. The scotch she was pouring was a 25-year-old Macallan, the general's favorite, a detail gleaned from a bribed clerk at a duty-free shop in Dubai 6 months prior. Her hand was perfectly steady as she added a single, perfectly clear ice cube. She returned to the table, placed the drink before him, and then, with an air of casual domesticity, she walked to the cool marble mantelpiece. She reached out and slightly turned a small, delicate porcelain figurine of a songbird so that it now faced the expansive window overlooking the city. To the general, it was a meaningless, absent-minded gesture. But in the claustrophobic confines of the van, it was a thunderclap. The signal was clean. The target was settled. Yaron leaned into his headset microphone, his voice a low, urgent whisper that carried no emotion, only instruction. Signal received. The bird is turned. Team Bravo, prepare for entry on my mark. All channels secure. Confirm readiness. A chorus of static-laced clicks answered him. The general, blissfully ignorant, raised his glass in a toast to his beautiful companion, a man standing on the very precipice of his own ruin, utterly unaware that his world, his career, his family, his life, his very identity, was about to be systematically torn apart, atom by atom, by the very woman he believed was his salvation. His life was no longer his own. It now belonged to the Mossad. This moment of quiet, calculated tension was not the product of chance, but the meticulous culmination of a year of painstaking, high-stakes intelligence work that began in the sterile, windowless briefing rooms of Mossad headquarters in North Tel Aviv, a building colloquially known as the Hill. The problem, as it so often was Syria. More specifically, It was a gaping black hole in Israel's knowledge of Syria's burgeoning and deeply alarming chemical and biological weapons program. American satellites could provide pristine, high-resolution imagery of new, suspiciously fortified bunkers being constructed deep in the desert wastes near Palmyra and Al-Safir. But their powerful lenses could not see through reinforced concrete. The signals intelligence experts of Unit 8200 could intercept whispers and fragments of conversations, but the most critical communications, technical specifications, production schedules, deployment protocols, were happening on secure fiber optic landlines, shielded from all forms of electronic eavesdropping. The intelligence community, facing mounting pressure from the government, needed a human source. They needed an asset with eyes, ears, and most importantly, access inside the Syrian High Command. They needed a traitor. The process of finding one is a dark and patient art, a methodical blend of data science, forensic psychology, and old-fashioned spycraft. Mossad's profiling unit, a division filled with an eclectic mix of academics, psychologists, and former detectives, spent months building a complex, multi-layered map of the Syrian military's senior leadership. They cross-referenced personnel files, financial records leaked from Panamanian law firms, travel manifests, and fragments of gossip gleaned from military attachés, disgruntled expatriates, and paid informants in European capitals. They weren't just looking for someone who could be bribed. They were hunting for a specific type of psychological fracture. They sought a man with a fundamental weakness, a personal flaw so deep and so raw that it could be located, isolated, and leveraged to shatter his national loyalty. They were looking for the corrosive acids of greed, for festering resentment, for crippling pride, for desperate lust. In General Adnan al-Hamid, they found the perfect storm. On paper, he was immaculate. A decorated hero of the 1973 Yom Kippur War, a loyal Ba'athist, and a brilliant career officer in charge of logistics and procurement for the Syrian Arab Army's elite 4th Armored Division. He was trusted, respected, and his position gave him legitimate access to the nation's most sensitive military secrets. But the digital ghosts in his life, the faint electronic trail he left across the world, told a very different story. His official salary was modest, yet he maintained a lifestyle far beyond his means, with a taste for luxury watches and Italian suits. Offshore bank accounts, meticulously hidden behind layers of shell corporations, showed small but regular deposits from unknown sources, almost certainly kickbacks from illicit arms deals. His travel records indicated a fondness for the expensive pleasures of European capitals, always under the guise of official procurement missions. Most telling of all was a recurring pattern of deep-seated resentment. Intercepted communications, captured by a listening post on the Golan Heights, revealed a man bitter about being repeatedly passed over for promotion. A man who felt his strategic genius was unappreciated by a corrupt regime that favored political connections and sectarian loyalty over battlefield merit. He was a proud man nursing a wounded ego, a dangerous and volatile cocktail of vulnerabilities. The thick file, codenamed the Sultan, landed on the desk of the head of Tsomet, the Mossad's Recruitment and Handling Division. The decision was swift. General al-Hamid would not just be a target. He would be the priority. The question was not if he could be broken, but how. A frontal approach was too clumsy, too risky. A simple cash offer might be reported as a sign of loyalty. Blackmail required hard evidence of a crime, and while they suspected his corruption, their proof was circumstantial. The answer, proposed by a veteran case officer, was an approach older than espionage itself, a tactic as old as Samson and Delilah. They would not find the crime, they would build it. They would not discover the leverage, they would create it. They would use a honey trap, but one of a sophistication and depth never before attempted. The agent chosen for this delicate, perilous, and morally ambiguous task was a woman known within the agency's classified files only by the code name Dahlia. She was not the stereotypical femme fatale of spy fiction. She was in her early 30s, with a doctorate in art history from the Sorbonne and a fluency in 5 languages, including a flawless, unaccented Levantine Arabic learned from her Iraqi-born grandparents. She had been recruited into the Mossad a decade earlier, plucked from a quiet academic life not for her looks, but for her extraordinary eidetic memory, her chameleon-like ability to adopt new personas, and her profound, intuitive understanding of human psychology. Her training at the Mossad's academy had been brutal and comprehensive, designed to strip away her civilian identity and reforge her into an instrument of the state. She had been taught to defeat polygraph machines by controlling her own autonomic nervous system, to withstand sleep deprivation and psychological interrogation techniques, to kill silently with her bare hands, and, most importantly, to master the art of emotional manipulation, to evoke, simulate, and leverage the deepest-seated human feelings without ever being touched by them herself. She was a psychological weapon, and her new identity, Helena Varthakouris, was her meticulously crafted sheath. Helena was a wealthy Greek art broker, the last scion of a once powerful shipping family, educated abroad, impossibly sophisticated, and faintly melancholic after a fictitious, tragic love affair with a promising young poet who had supposedly died in a climbing accident. This backstory gave her a plausible reason to travel, to frequent the 5-star hotels and exclusive galleries where a man like General Al-Hamid might be found. And it provided a veneer of emotional vulnerability that would make her seem both intriguing and approachable. The Mossad's Operational Support Division, Caesarea, spent 3 months breathing life into the ghost of Helena Varthakouris. They built her a pervasive digital footprint, a sleek, professional website for her fictional gallery in Athens, Varthakouris Fine Arts, complete with a history of past exhibitions. They planted fabricated articles about her in obscure art magazines and blogs, praising her discerning eye for post-war modernism. They created a history of her attendance at major auctions at Sotheby's and Christie's. They built social media profiles populated with a network of friends and colleagues who were, in reality, other Mossad officers stationed across Europe, ready to interact with her posts and solidify her legend. They rented a lavish apartment for her in the upscale Kolonaki district of Athens and a small chic gallery space nearby, stocking it with real art on loan from a friendly and discreet Israeli collector. By the time General Al-Hamid planned his next official trip to Athens, a thinly veiled excuse for a holiday away from his wife and the oppressive scrutiny of Damascus, Helena was a real, tangible person. The trap was meticulously baited. The surveillance team, hand-picked experts from the elite Kaidan unit, the Mossad's covert action and assassination arm, arrived in Athens 2 weeks before the general. They were ghosts, moving through the city with practiced anonymity, their faces forgettable, their presence leaving no ripple. They swept Helena's apartment and the target's designated hotel suite for any existing listening devices before expertly installing their own. Pinhole cameras, with lenses no larger than a screw head, were embedded in crown moldings and light fixtures, offering a panoramic, high-definition view of the rooms. Thermally powered microphones were hidden in lamps, smoke detectors, and power outlets, designed to operate for months without needing a battery change. A separate team established a command post in a rented commercial space with a front as a logistics company, a place where they could monitor the audio and video feeds in real time. Their encrypted communication systems linking them directly via satellite to headquarters in Tel Aviv. They were the unseen gods of this artificial world. The silent stagehands ready to watch the drama they had so carefully and expensively arranged. The first meeting was a masterpiece of orchestrated serendipity. The Mossad knew from their deep surveillance of Al-Hamid's personal computer that, despite his public image as a hardened military man, he had a private passion for ancient history and often spent his afternoons wandering quietly through local museums when abroad. Dahlia, in full character as the elegant and cerebral Helena, was there, seated on a bench in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, seemingly engrossed in sketching a Cycladic figurine in a charcoal pad. She had positioned herself near an exhibit of Mycenaean armor and weaponry, knowing from his file that it was a particular interest of his. As he passed, lost in thought, she executed her move. She accidentally dropped her sketchbook, its pages scattering across the polished marble floor in a display of calculated clumsiness. The general, a man who prided himself on his old-world chivalry, immediately stooped to help her gather the sheets. He was instantly struck by her beauty, but it was her intellect that truly hooked him. As he handed back a detailed drawing of a linear B tablet, she smiled and commented, in fluent French, on the subtle inaccuracies in the museum's official translation, offering a more nuanced interpretation. He was not just intrigued, he was mesmerized. They spoke for nearly an hour, their conversation flowing effortlessly from ancient Greek script to the philosophy of warfare, and eventually, cautiously, to the state of the modern Middle East. Dahlia played her part to perfection, listening more than she spoke, her questions subtly stroking his ego, making him feel like the most brilliant and misunderstood man in the world. She mentioned her gallery then, with a hint of genuine-sounding regret. Said she had to leave for a meeting with a client. She did not ask for his number. She did not suggest they meet again. She simply smiled, thanked him for his kindness, and walked away. Her departure leaving a vacuum of charm and intrigue that he felt compelled to fill. The hook was set deep. Over the next 2 weeks, their chance encounters continued, each one a carefully calculated move on a chessboard only she and her handlers could see. They ran into each other at a high-end restaurant in Kolonaki, where the Mossad had reserved adjacent tables, her business dinner ending just as he was having his coffee. She saw him browsing in a bookstore and recommended a volume of poetry by Cavafy, sparking another brief but intense conversation about exile and longing. Each meeting was brief, public, and always ended by her, leaving him with a persistent, gnawing sense of pleasant frustration. He was the pursuer, or so he was brilliantly led to believe. He was the one who finally, after a week of this carefully choreographed dance, gathered the courage to ask for her telephone number. He was the one who invited her to dinner. The location was a restaurant of her choosing, a quiet, exclusive place where the Mossad had already bugged their preferred corner table weeks in advance, compromising a waiter to ensure they were seated there. During that dinner, the real work began. Dahlia, with the skill of a master interrogator disguised as an empathetic friend, expertly guided the conversation away from pleasantries and into the territory of his life, his work, his deep-seated frustrations. She was a virtuoso of active listening, her every nod and expression of sympathy a precision tool designed to unlock him. He spoke of the fools and sycophants in Damascus, the politically connected appointees who hampered his work and took credit for his successes. He complained about his family, who didn't understand the immense pressures he was under. He boasted of his strategic importance, hinting at the secret projects he oversaw, projects the idiots in command could barely comprehend. To him, it was the cathartic unburdening of a lonely, powerful man, to the first person who seemed to truly understand him. To Yaron and his team of analysts, listening intently in the command van, it was a cascade of pure gold. Every word was recorded, transcribed, and cross-referenced with their existing intelligence, building an ever-clearer picture of his psyche. Dahlia was building a psychological profile in real time, identifying his deepest insecurities and his most cherished desires. He didn't just want wealth. He wanted recognition. He didn't just want pleasure. He wanted a life of meaning and freedom, a world away from the stifling paranoia and mediocrity of Damascus. Helena, the beautiful, intelligent art dealer, was becoming the living, breathing embodiment of that fantasy. The relationship escalated exactly as the Mossad profilers had predicted it would. After their third dinner, he walked her back to her apartment, and she invited him in for a nightcap. The pinhole cameras in her apartment, hidden with microscopic precision by the Kaidan team, began to roll. The seduction was not a whirlwind of passion, but a slow, deliberate, and controlled campaign. Dahlia allowed him to court her, to feel that he was the one in control, the one leading the affair. The physical intimacy, when it happened, was just another layer of the operation, a biological key to unlock the final vaults of his psyche, creating a bond of shared secrecy that isolated him further from his real life. For the surveillance team, these moments were stripped of all emotion, rendered sterile by the technology that captured them. They were clinical observers watching a biological process unfold, their hushed conversations focused on camera angles, audio clarity, and the duration of the encounter. To them, the general's sighs of pleasure and whispered declarations were just data points, audible and visual confirmation that the compromising material, was being successfully gathered and archived. The operation then deepened, moving into its next phase. Dahlia, as Helena, suggested a weekend trip. "Let's escape the city," she said one evening, her voice a soft murmur against his ear. "Let's go to the sea. Just the two of us." A private luxury yacht, the Poseidon, was chartered through a front company. Its captain and two-man crew were, in reality, seasoned commandos from Shayatet 13, the Israeli Naval Special Forces unit, posing as taciturn civilian sailors. For 2 days, they sailed the Saronic Gulf. Under the warm Greek sun, with the azure expanse of the Aegean stretching out before him, General Adnan al-Hamid let his guard down completely. He felt free, alive, and deeply in love for the first time in decades. In this bubble of manufactured bliss, he spoke openly about things that would have cost him his life in Damascus. He detailed Syrian troop movements on the Golan Heights, revealing a plan for a surprise redeployment. He complained about the technical specifications of a new Iranian-supplied missile system, inadvertently giving away its critical vulnerabilities. And, in a moment of supreme hubris, he sketched out the exact location and layout of a new, hardened command and control bunker he had personally designed near the Lebanese border. He was showing off, trying to impress the woman who he believed adored him, desperate to prove his importance in a world outside his uniform. Every boast, every secret, every tactical detail was captured by microphones hidden in the yacht's fittings and relayed via a secure, burst transmission satellite link to the analysts in Tel Aviv. On their last night on the yacht, anchored in a secluded cove under a brilliant canopy of stars, he confessed that he loved her. He spoke of a future together, of leaving his old life behind, of finding a way to be with her. Dahlia, holding his hand, looked into his eyes with a perfectly feigned expression of reciprocal love and profound sorrow, her own heart beating a slow, steady rhythm of mission discipline. She knew the end was near. She was a spider, and the fly had not only entered her web, but had finished wrapping itself in its own silk. Her part in the seduction was over. Now it was time for the kill. They returned to Athens, to the presidential suite at the King George Hotel that had been the primary stage for their affair. The atmosphere had shifted. The general was giddy, energized, already planning their next rendezvous, a future that existed only in his mind. Dahlia, by contrast, was quiet. A subtle tension coiled behind her eyes that he misinterpreted as a lover's melancholy at their impending separation. She poured him a final glass of the expensive scotch, her movements economical and precise. He rambled on about their next trip, perhaps to Paris or Rome, about the logistics of his travel, about how they could make it work. As he talked, she moved to the mantelpiece and made the small, almost imperceptible adjustment to the porcelain bird, turning it to face the window. It was the signal. Seconds later, there was a soft knock at the suite's adjoining door, a door that should have been locked from the inside. The general looked up, his face a mask of annoyance at the interruption. "I asked for no disturbances," he said to Dahlia, a flicker of irritation in his voice. She didn't answer. Her face was a blank slate. The door opened, and a man he had never seen before walked in. He was of medium height, dressed in a simple, unassuming dark suit. His expression was neither friendly nor hostile. It was utterly neutral, the face of a bureaucrat or an accountant. It was Yaron. "General Al-Hamid," Yaron said, his voice calm and even, devoid of any accent the general could place. "My name is not important. Please sit down. We have some matters to discuss." The general shot to his feet, his face flushing with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Who the hell are you? This is a private suite. How did you get in here? Get out now, or I will call hotel security." Yaron simply gestured to an empty armchair. "That would be most unwise, General." He then turned his gaze to Dahlia. "Helena, if you would be so kind." The woman the general knew as Helena, the love of his life, the keeper of his secret heart, looked at him. And in that instant, her face transformed. The warmth, the sympathy, the melancholy, the affection, it all vanished, wiped away as if it had never been there. It was replaced by a gaze of such cold, professional detachment it chilled him to his core. It was like watching a beautiful, lifelike mask melt away to reveal a stranger of polished, unfeeling steel beneath. The psychological shock was a physical blow. He staggered back a step, his mind reeling, unable to process the sudden, violent shift in his reality. Yaron didn't raise his voice. He simply picked up a remote control from the table and turned on the large television screen mounted on the wall. The screen flickered to life. It showed the general and Helena on the yacht, his arm draped around her, the sun on their faces as he pointed towards the coast. His own voice, tinny and distant, could be heard explaining the weaknesses in Syria's coastal radar defenses. The scene cut to the hotel room, to their most intimate moments, recorded from 3 different angles with perfect, unforgiving clarity. The scene shifted again, to a restaurant table, and he heard his own voice, amplified by the television speakers, complaining bitterly about President Assad, describing his contempt for his commanding officers, naming names. It cut to a clip of him in this very room, drunkenly drawing a crude map of a secret weapons depot on a cocktail napkin for her, boasting about its impregnability. The montage lasted for 2 minutes, a silent, damning summary of his comprehensive betrayal, edited for maximum psychological impact. When it finished, the room was utterly silent, save for the hum of the air conditioner. The general stood frozen, his skin pale and slick with a sudden, cold sweat, his breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. The man he was just minutes before, the powerful general, the confident lover, the respected strategist, was gone, executed on the screen before him, replaced by a terrified, broken shell. "You have 2 paths before you, General," Yaron said, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "The first path is public. This evidence, in its entirety, is sent to your superiors in Damascus. You will be arrested, disgraced. Your family will be shamed and ostracized. You will be interrogated by men who are far less gentle than I am. You will be tortured. And then, most likely, you will be hanged from a crane in Marjay Square for treason. The second path is a private one. You return to Damascus tomorrow, as planned. You continue your work. You accept the promotion that is coming your way. But from now on, you also work for us. You provide us with information. You answer our questions. In return, you will be very well compensated, and a secure future will be guaranteed for you. When the time is right, when your position is no longer tenable, we will extract you and your immediate family. We will give you a new life, a new identity, and complete financial security for the rest of your days. You can be a dead traitor in Syria, or you can be a quiet hero for peace, living a very comfortable life in the West. The choice," Yaron concluded, his movements deliberate as he placed a small, heavily encrypted satellite phone on the table between them, "is yours to make." General Adnan al-Hamid did not hesitate. There was no choice to make. The fight had evaporated from him, replaced by the icy, primal instinct for self-preservation. He looked from Yaron's implacable face to the cold stranger who had been Helena, and he saw not a choice, but a sentence. His life had been forfeit the moment he helped her pick up that sketchbook. He nodded slowly, a single defeated gesture of capitulation. The recruitment was complete. The tension in the room broke, replaced by a cold, businesslike efficiency. Yaron and another man who entered from the adjoining room, a technical specialist, spent the next hour briefing the general on his new reality. They gave him his new code name, Cyrus. They taught him the basic, unforgiving rules of tradecraft. How to use the satellite phone, which operated on a secure frequency-hopping network. How to arrange digital dead drops using steganography, hiding messages within the data of innocuous-looking image files. How to detect surveillance, and a set of emergency signals and duress codes. It was a crash course in a world he had only ever seen from the other side. Dahlia was the last to speak to him before they left. She approached him not as Helena, but as a professional intelligence officer conducting a final debrief. "You will follow your instructions precisely," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion, a clinical finality in her tone. "There is no room for error. Your survival, and the survival of your wife and children, now depends entirely on your discipline and your obedience." He couldn't meet her eyes. To look at her was to look at the architect of his own destruction. The next morning, General al-Hamid flew back to Damascus. To his colleagues and family, he seemed unchanged, perhaps a little more tired and withdrawn from his trip, a plausible side effect of his demanding job. But inside, he was a hollow man. a ghost haunting his own life, living in a constant, suffocating state of managed terror. He was now a high-level asset for Israeli intelligence, a cancer planted in the heart of the Syrian regime. The intelligence he provided was a torrent, a flood of information so rich and so vital, it was codenamed the Damascus Files in Mossad communications. He provided the complete, updated order of battle for all Syrian forces on the Golan Heights, including deployment schedules, ammunition levels, and readiness statuses. He gave them the exact GPS coordinates and structural blueprints of the new chemical weapons bunkers near Palmyra, allowing Israeli intelligence and their Western allies to monitor them with pinpoint accuracy. He exposed a covert cell of Hezbollah operatives planning a sophisticated cross-border attack from southern Lebanon, leading to a preemptive and deniable IDF strike that saved dozens of civilian lives. For 7 long years, General al-Hamid, the asset known as Cyrus, was the Mossad's crown jewel, their most valuable and productive source in the entire Arab world. He continued to rise through the ranks in Syria, his access to secrets growing with every promotion, his reports becoming more and more critical to Israel's national security. The end, when it came, was abrupt and terrifying. A rival general, long suspicious of al-Hamid's uncanny successes and rapid rise, initiated a covert internal investigation through the Syrian Air Force Intelligence Directorate, a notoriously brutal agency. Cyrus, noticing the subtle signs of surveillance, unfamiliar cars on his street, clicks on his phone line, used his one-time emergency signal, a seemingly innocent email to a dormant account. The Mossad's extraction plan, a detailed protocol that had been war-gamed and rehearsed for years, was activated immediately. Within 48 hours, as a team from the Intelligence Directorate was preparing to storm his home in Damascus, a Mossad extraction team from the Kidon unit, operating under diplomatic cover, spirited al-Hamid, his unsuspecting wife, and his 2 children out of their house in the dead of night. They were taken to a safe house, then driven south in a specially modified vehicle with hidden compartments, navigating a series of back roads to a remote, unguarded section of the border with Jordan. By dawn, they were gone. To the world, and to the apoplectic Syrian regime, it was as if the general and his family had simply ceased to exist. They were given new identities, new passports, new histories, and even new faces through extensive plastic surgery. They began a new life in an undisclosed North American city, financially secure for generations, but forever imprisoned by the secret they carried, living in a gilded cage of their own making. The legacy of Operation Aegean Gambit is not written in any public history books. Its details are not taught in military academies. It exists only in the most highly classified archives in Tel Aviv and in the quiet, foundational changes it made to the balance of power in the Middle East during a critical and volatile decade. The intelligence provided by Cyrus directly prevented multiple cross-border conflicts, dismantled terrorist networks before they could strike, and gave Israel an unprecedented strategic advantage, allowing its leaders to navigate a perilous geopolitical landscape with a degree of certainty their adversaries could not comprehend. It was a textbook success, a perfect execution of one of the riskiest and most complex maneuvers in the espionage playbook. Yet, beneath the strategic triumph, the story is also a chilling testament to the profound human cost of this shadow war. It is a story of absolute betrayal, built on a foundation of manufactured love and weaponized intimacy. The operation succeeded not just because of sophisticated technology or meticulous planning, but because it expertly targeted the universal human frailties of loneliness, pride, and the desperate, deep-seated yearning for a different, better life. In the silent, brutal calculus of national security, the emotional devastation of one man and the moral compromises of the agents who broke him were deemed a necessary and ultimately acceptable price to pay for the safety of the state. And so, the great, invisible game continues, fought not only on battlefields with soldiers and tanks, but in the quiet, luxurious hotel suites of neutral cities, in the whispered conversations across candlelit dinner tables, and in the guarded recesses of the human heart. It is in these places that loyalty can be corroded, that a person's soul can be turned into a key, and that their deepest secrets can become a nation's most powerful and unforgiving weapon. The fate of nations can, and often does, turn on a single, broken promise whispered in the dark.